You think playing cards were designed for games. They weren't. They were designed to move power, quietly. And once you understand that, you'll never look at a deck of cards the same way again. Before cards had symbols, before kings and queens, before red and black, there was paper, and there was value. The story doesn't begin in Europe. It doesn't even begin with games. It begins in China. Around the 9th century, China invents paper. And almost immediately, paper becomes dangerous. Because paper can represent value, can be counted, can be transferred, can be risked. The earliest cards weren't really cards. They were paper tokens. Some were numbered. Some were stamped. Some were literally money you could gamble with. The first card games were just money. Shuffled. No suits. No symbols. Just numbers, chance, and loss. From the very beginning, cards weren't about fun. They were about risk. As these paper objects traveled west, they changed. Because everything that travels mutates. They moved along trade routes, through merchants, soldiers, and empires. But cards didn't jump from east to west. They passed through systems. What you're about to hear is the part most history books skip. Not because it's unimportant, but because it sits in the middle. Between China and the Islamic world, there was a bridge, Persia. Without Iran, playing cards would never have reached their modern form, or survived the journey at all. Persia didn't invent playing cards, but it transformed them. Here, paper already made sense. Records, accounts, tokens, games of chance. Cards arrived not as toys, but as familiar tools. Iran made cards more standardized. It pushed them away from being money-like, and closer to being instruments of play. They moved beyond markets, into informal spaces, coffee houses, courts, journeys. Cards didn't just pass through Iran. They stabilized there. They became portable, social, repeatable. Iran didn't redesign the cards. It didn't add symbols. It didn't claim ownership. It did something more important, carried them forward. From China through Persia, into the Islamic world. By the 13th century, cards appear in Egypt, under the Mamluk Sultanate. This is where suits are born. Not symbols, categories. The Mamluk deck had for suits, coins, cups, swords, and polo sticks. Each suit represented power, economic power, social power, military power, elite leisure. Every suit was a role. Every card was a rank. There were no faces, no kings staring back at you. Islamic culture avoided human imagery, so the cards were abstract, geometric, patterned, cold. Up to this point, cards were systems. Europe is where they become characters. Then Europe got involved. And Europe did what it always does. It added faces. By the 14th and 15th centuries, cards flooded Europe. And chaos followed. Italy kept swords, cups, coins, and clubs. Spain followed a similar system. Germany experimented wildly. Leaves, bells, acorns. There was no standard, no universal deck. For a while, playing cards meant completely different things, depending on where you were standing, until one country simplified everything. France. France didn't care about meaning, cared about scale. Hand-painted cards were slow, expensive, inconsistent. France asked a single question: how do we print this faster? Details were stripped away. Curves became icons. Complex designs became simple shapes. For symbols survived. Spades, hearts, diamonds, clubs. Not because they meant more, but because they were easier to reproduce. They could be stenciled, printed, recognized instantly. 2 colors, 2 inks, red and black. Spades evolved from swords, hearts from cups, diamonds from coins, clubs from polo sticks. But by now, meaning didn't matter anymore. Replication did. France exported these decks everywhere, through trade, printing, and war. Slowly, all other systems disappeared, not because they were wrong, but because they were inefficient. Every time you shuffle a deck, you're holding centuries of trial and error. Iran didn't invent playing cards, but without Iran, playing cards would never have gone global. So why 52 cards? This isn't a coincidence, and it isn't mystical either. It's structural. Once suits were fixed at 4, the question wasn't what looks nice, it was what repeats cleanly. Early card makers needed balance, symmetry, predictability. For suits multiplied by 13 values, 52. Not because of destiny, but because it worked. 13 is the key. Before modern mathematics, 13 was already a complete cycle. In many ancient systems, 13 marked transition, from growth to decay, from beginning to reset, and it fit perfectly inside four seasons, for directions, for divisions of space. A deck became a grid of time and order. But here's where it gets interesting. 52 cards also mirror the year, roughly 52 weeks, for seasons, 13 weeks per season. This wasn't astrology. It was familiarity, a system people already lived inside. You didn't need to explain it. You felt it. The deck didn't just sit in your hands. It matched the rhythm of your life, and that made it stick. Once this structure appeared, it dominated everything else. Smaller decks lacked complexity. Larger decks collapsed under chaos. 52 was stable, portable, expandable. You could invent endless games without breaking the system. That's why it survived. Not because it was perfect, but because it was adaptable. And once Europe standardized it, 52 stopped being a choice. It became the default. Every shuffle after that was just a variation on the same structure, a system strong enough to survive centuries of change.